All right, well, hello everyone to the last session of the day and possibly the conference. So I'm really thrilled to be ending this. This panel is on the next agricultural revolution. So I think we've heard a lot throughout the conference on the technologies needed for alternative proteins. If you just watch my session on alternative proteins, also materials, and what do we need in order to make all of that happen? We need an agricultural revolution. And so here we have three experts who are going to talk to us about the new technologies, sustainable practices, and innovative approaches that are shaping the ways we produce food and materials. So I'd like to welcome our first speaker. I'll make a quick introduction. So Debajyoti Chatterjee is the Director of Research and Policy at Samayu, India. He is a zoologist turned ecological entomologist and has obtained his doctoral from Forest Research Institute. He's been actively engaged in research programs on ecological and agricultural etymology in various premier universities and research institutions of India for the last 11 years. He has vast experience in working with various forest and agro-ecosystems of India, ranging from the high-altitude regions up to the plains and coastal belts. So please help welcome.
Thank you, Nicole. Good evening, all. I'm Debajyoti Chatterjee from Samayu. I'm working as Director of Research and Policy. So today, I'll be talking about the farm animal well-being, intersection with environment and human perspective, experience from the field. When we talk about the next agriculture revolution, we know that the inclusion of animal right and animal welfare is inseparable of this food system, as we often see that these aspects are being overlooked in global food system, despite their crucial ethical treatments of animals and sustainability of our planet. So what's the way forward? We believe the way forward is in this new era of agriculture is an intersectional approach, acknowledging the interconnectedness of animal welfare, human right, and environmental sustainability. My talk will cover these aspects under this what Samayu is undertaking, the endeavor, and our experience from the field. So let's start. Our organization, Samayu, is dedicated to ensure the well-being of animal, people, and planet. So we are the group of organizations and people who care about the interconnectedness of animal, people, and our planet, working together to create a just, fair world for all, along with reimagining the food system through plant-based way. In the present animal agricultural sector, with advancement of science and technology, we know there are multifaceted issues which cannot be dealt and resolved in isolation. So all these issues from different stratum of the sector will have to be dealt under one system, and for that, we embrace the One Health approach. I'll be coming in detail to that. So our approach addresses the challenges to create the effort to create a systematic change in this agricultural sector, especially in animal agriculture, wherein we create an intersectional platform for the relevant stakeholders of the particular sector, promote well-being of animals in the farming sector through stakeholder engagement, and along with that, we encourage plant-based consumption and drive narrative change. We undertake this entire venture through our two major verticals. One is the farming vertical, which is aiming to change the practices away from the industrial farming. Our target audiences are the poultry and inland aquaculture farmers in India, especially the marginal and smallholder farmers. We undertake the approach of training and capacity building in farmers to awaken them in the new era of sustainable farming, wherein we include the animal well-being and animal welfare in the new and sustainable farming system. And we follow the One Health concept. That is actually the way we encourage this sustainable farming. And in the long run, our vision is to transition away from harmful industrial farming towards a plant-based livelihood opportunities. So I would like to present our success in this through our first vertical, that is resilient farming vertical. We have done that stakeholder engagement program on One Health implementation very recently. So we have conducted a One Health training and capacity building program for the poultry farmers in Vijayawada, Andhra Pradesh, a southern state in India, in May 2023, wherein we have witnessed a huge intersectional stakeholder participation, over 100 plus participation from different stratum of the sector, including the farmers, veterinarians, government officials, public health people, other health specialists, then industrial key players. They have come and shared one dais, discussed the sectoral concerns, and the way forward was worked out. One of the major achievement of that program is consensus building over curbing the non-clinical use of antibiotic for holistic welfare of poultry, birds, human, and environment. So what we have done, we have presented, initially we have reached out to the stakeholders, we have identified the points of concern, then we have discussed this through different level of stakeholders, we have taken the problems to the experts, and finally we have conducted this workshop wherein all representatives came together, discussed the matter, and finally we arrived at a consensus. Our most notable achievement of this is a submission of joint representation letter to the respective state government, aiming the ban of antibiotic as a growth promoter. And this entire mission was led by Samayu. We are currently under policy progression in this way. Here are some glimpses of our field intervention wherein we reached out to the stakeholders, we identified the problems. You can see some pictures here that the conditions of poultry birds and the contribution of our unsustainable aquaculture practices that is damaging the natural environment. We have identified these points, we have taken to the stakeholders, the experts, and we worked out the solution. So here are the glimpse of the training and capacity building program, wherein we got this grand success to pull these stakeholders in one platform and discuss the issue with an open view. So our next approach is through cultivation of plant-based consumption. That's a parallel approach to bring sustainability in the farming system. Samayu runs a number of campaigns for plant-based consumption. We run public awareness programs, provide resources and supports for plant-based eating habit. We conduct these in schools and colleges also through lecture and online and offline mode. And we follow here also an intersectional approach in leveraging the environmental and youth education. Here we are working with 9 intersectional partner organizations across 8 states of India. Food and You 2.0 is our flagship endeavor in this process, and we encourage people to eat plant-based meals for a month under a plant-based challenge. During that time, the participants receive a weekly newsletter with recipes, tips, and resources to help them succeed the challenge and transform themselves towards a plant-based dietary system. And these campaigns have resulted a significant increase in plant-based diet among the participants that we have witnessed. Some of our glimpse of these events in person in schools, and you can see that we organized such kind of programs in streets also, and we have organized a zero waste cycling event throughout India in 8 cities at a time. Last year the event was undertaken, and it was also a grand success. Now, our interverticular approach is to drive a narrative change. That is Samayu's attempt to drive the public consensus and rephrase the policy framing in food system. How do we approach that? We go for effective collaboration with policymakers, NGOs, and other key change makers in the sector. We promote animal welfare and sustainable food system through our interventions, be it in Food and You 2.0 campaign or our One Health. And we also parallelly run public awareness campaigns to educate people about the importance of these sectoral concerns and how to resolve it in a sustainable way. And finally, we encourage people to take a call of action for this changing the narrative, to undertake the change in real ground reality so that we see the impact. Here, I would like to present our success in promotion in DEI in Asia level. We have collaborated with local NGOs and policymakers to bring the policy and implementation, policy reform and implementation properly that promotes DEI in animal agriculture sector. We follow that more equitable access to the resources and opportunities for marginalized communities in the region. That's why we always opt for working with the marginalized and smallholders. In poultry sector, we especially targeting the backyard poultry farmers, as these sectors are having least support from any other technological and government support system. We know that the big players, they have their own systems, but when we come to this level, we find that they're practicing this not so much willingly, but they do not have any choice. So we try to reach out to them, and we try to refine their ongoing system to bring sustainability, and finally to push them towards a plant-forwarded alternative in livelihood. And in our campaigns, we specially craft a program, specially design a program for the well-being of the women marginalized farmers, especially under One Health program. So these are a few glances of our endeavor. We have partnered with 38 plus NGOs in India. We have organized many online and offline events to reach out to the policymakers in local and national level. We reached out to the policy experts to work in the existing policy and how to reframe them towards more sustainability and incorporating the animal welfare and animal well-being in the existing food system in India. Now, why this approach is critical today? Especially emphasizing the new farming era, as we are in this session talking about the new next agriculture revolution. We know that the world is facing increasing challenges related to climate change, then public health and social justice in animal farming sector. So the Samayu's this intersectional approach is more critical to resolve these concerns, wherein we create an intersectional platform and ensure the interconnectedness of these components from that single platform to take it further. And thus, we approach to create a more just and sustainable food system for all. So that's all I had to share with all of you. Thank you.
Oh, that picture with the little girl with the chicken was absolutely adorable. I feel like I want to borrow that for some of our campaigns. So now I would like to invite up Kate Blaszak. She's the Director of Protein Transition at Asia Research and Engagement in Singapore. At R, Kate leads research and collaborative engagement with investors at the Asia Protein Transition Platform to conduct shareholder advocacy with Asian food companies and banks towards a responsible and sustainable protein transition. Kate has expertise in food systems, farmed animal health, welfare, One Health, and alternative protein landscapes, complementing a broader knowledge of environmental social governance. Formerly Global Head of Research for Animals in Farming and an APAC External Affairs Advisor and Program Manager for World Animal Protection, She contributed to global strategies, campaigns, and policy, leading some of corporate engagement, research, and One Health collaborations, along with prior government roles. Kate is originally a veterinarian with a master's in science and examination memberships in animal welfare, epidemiology, governance, and leadership. Kate is currently a board director for the Australian Alliance for Animals. All right. Please welcome to the stage, Kate.
Thanks very much and good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be invited to speak. The following topics in this session, and first of all, I'd like to introduce our Asia Research and Engagement, or ARE. Let's check. Okay, that's great. ARE collaborates with institutional investors that have holdings in some of Asia's largest listed food companies. We also engage Asia's banks as well to try and shift the sort of finance flows and investment in food. And essentially, we've collaborated with them for a number of years, but last year we went through a process to develop the Asia Protein Transition Platform. And that helped to define not only expected disclosures that investors want to see, but also a fundamental vision and clear goals for companies towards 2030. Right, what's happening here? The key tenet of this platform, because there's a lot of writing on this slide, is really two things in protein transition. More responsible animal protein production, but limited, and more sustainable proteins, particularly alternative proteins and other traditional plant-based. And then there's a whole range of systems, elements that we want them to strengthen, from transparency and traceability, of course, phasing out prophylactic antibiotic use, net zero targets, responsible use of natural capital, labour and human rights, farm animal welfare, of course, and also eliminating deforestation and so forth, and responsible use of chemicals, water and so forth. These are our founding investor members. They don't pay us to do this. We collaborate, or not so far anyway. So it is in ARE-led or investor-backed engagement of these companies, and we work closely together. The platform hosts a range of tools for companies, but also this recent research that I'm going to present in a range of forms, including a dedicated report in Chinese. Essentially, we also do some solution-oriented introductions and also encourage policies and so forth. And so we're very happy to introduce other organisations that can help companies and their suppliers transition. So on the research and the assumption, broadly, the goal was to sort of model what would be protein secure and climate safe pathways for Asia's 10 largest markets, and therefore to discover the minimum alternative proteins needed. This is not a feasibility study. This is not a consumer or market-based study. It is what is scientifically needed based on population protein demand in Asia to get us towards the Paris climate goals broadly. Because for the largest companies and banks, they're at the climate level, so we need to meet them where they are. I also want to attribute the modelling work to my colleague and research manager, Dave Luo. He did all the modelling work behind this. So we know that the emissions problem is one of the protein production in particular, and we know that a sizable proportion of land and energy use is in feed production, and we know that that is inefficient. We know that the upstream impacts from animal feed sourcing are significant, as well as deforestation. And we know in this region it is expanding very quickly in terms of intensive farming. Some countries are already sort of at maximum intensive farming. And the general premise behind this is that all future protein will be provided not by smallholders in this region, but by corporate and corporate consolidation. And that is fairly widely held. We know that last year, in September, the Science Based Target Initiative released their forest, land and agriculture guidance, and this was key on which to build our research. they have various targets near term and then longer term targets towards net zero. But actually it's not net zero, it's a 72% reduction in emissions by 2050, because there is broad acknowledgement that the food system cannot fully decarbonise. And then ideally to get there, we need zero deforestation by 2025. We adapted this framework to suit Asia because, to some degree, of what was feasible in terms of adapting the target 2050 to 2060 to some degree, because China's dual decarbonisation target is by 2060. And also it was pretty infeasible to end deforestation through Asian food supply chains by 2025. So to some degree we extended that. We covered the 10 largest markets, as I mentioned. The horizon is pitched also at 2030, but out to 2050, 2060. And we wanted to look at the greatest impact that these had. But we acknowledge that this doesn't cover all the other systemic issues like AMR, like labour, human rights, etc., etc. So there are other benefits. We take China as an example. So obviously the largest market, the largest protein producer, and also globally a major contributor. So essentially we took the research in 3 stages or 3 scenarios, and I'll use China as an example. First, on the top left, the business as usual scenario, where we actually model the emissions with business as usual protein consumption from meat, dairy, seafood and eggs. Now in China, the actual population, as we know, has peaked and is going to decline. But we still know that GDP growth is huge, over 200%, and that is driving increased consumption, which will then eventually plateau. So we know that, yes, protein consumption will increase somewhat, and then total will decrease slightly. In the next scenario, the best case mitigation is considered, because we know that the top one will blow the trajectory and emissions by almost 18 gigatons of in excess of climate safety. In the best case mitigation, we thought, okay, let's give industry the benefit of the doubt for the moment and see what we can do with that. So we set a whole lot of parameters that would be ideal if the industry implemented all of those. Like, yes, eliminated deforestation, went 100% clean energy, etc., as you can see there in the box. But they still can't get to climate safety, which is, of course, the yellow line. So they're still in excess. So if industry does everything that they promise, they're just not going to get there. So, of course, then we looked at the final supplement, which would be alternative proteins. And we conferred with the Good Food Institute and their technical experts and so forth, and said, well, what sort of mix should we provide in terms of plant-based, cultivated meat and precision fermentation? And so they gave us some sort of advice on that. And we knew, of course, when those things might be phasing in more likely for commercial availability. And essentially what we found, for example, in China, was that in terms of all the mitigations, eliminating deforestation was essential and was key. This must happen by 2030, if not sooner, of course. The industrial production system must peak by 2030, and other research from China has shown that this sector, along with others, needs to peak at 2030 for China to meet its net zero goals. And then a minimum of 50% alternative proteins will be needed by 2060, and around 12% by 2035, which aligns with the Boston Consulting Group's work of, I think, 11%. So we knew we were fairly on track. That's China. So again, just to reiterate, the different types of mitigation that the industry uses and how they relate to emissions reduction. And as you can see, particularly for China, deforestation is key. But also there's other elements. But we still know that alternative proteins are going to be absolutely essential to meet protein security and climate safety, and of course save a lot of animals. My colleague also modelled the capital expenditure costs. What would it cost China from 2020 to 2060 in terms of facilities, new build facilities for both plant-based, precision fermentation and cultivated meat, to scale up and meet this transition? Well, it looks like a lot, $731 billion US. However, when you look at this and think of this figure in context, this is 3% 3.4% of China's livestock industry gross production value. So what this means is on an annual year, or over this period, they would spend around 3% themselves in the conventional animal production industry. So this is actually achievable and could be less costly than the existing systems. Now moving just in summary to the other main markets, but we have detailed one-pages for each of these markets. I talked about China, of course. Japan is interesting because that is, like Thailand, already at maximal intensive industry, and that needs to peak ASAP. And then, of course, to be complemented with about 45% alternative proteins by 2060. South Korea, Indonesia, Vietnam, Malaysia, similarly percentages and have maybe a little bit more time, but of course we want them to peak sooner. India and Pakistan, again, are interesting because they're starting from a low base of per capita protein consumption. And this is where the common but differentiated responsibilities might come into play. But there is very rapid increase in protein consumption in these two markets, particularly India, driven not only by population increase, but by very high increases in GDP and wealth, of course. Not surprising, but they are significant. And so when you think about 85–90% is huge, partly because particularly India is not protein secure now. So to become protein secure and meet its climate goals, there's a lot to be done. In summary, aside from eliminating deforestation and all these other aspects, because this is on top of the best case scenario, factory farming needs to peak in this region by 2030 and then decline. And then diversifying proteins between 30–90%, depending on the market that we modelled, as a minimum. This is implicitly implies that there's flexitarianism. So essentially, to be able to meet their net zero goals, scale up alternative proteins and peak industrial animal protein, there will need to be a flexitarian approach, obviously. I think what was really an eye-opener in all of this are relatively conservative figures for annual meat and fish consumption. This was based on, I think, 2020 data. And you can see that actually, aside from East Asia, China, South Korea, Japan, not surprisingly, eating excess meat per person, but Vietnam and Malaysia, particularly Vietnam, surprised me. And when we compare the yellow with the Eat Lancet guidelines, this is around, they recommend no more than around 25 kilograms of meat and seafood per person per year. So you can see that actually the top 5 countries are eating almost twice as much, in some cases more than twice as much, the recommended guidelines. So not only is this the problem in the West in terms of needing to decrease meat consumption, but there is definitely an issue. And ministries of health, ministries of nutrition are actually starting to raise this as a problem and are concerned. Just a few discussion points briefly. Essentially, we know, thank goodness, COP28 is finally going to include food for the first time. So amazing work that everyone's been doing to try and raise that as a key climate issue. But we know fundamentally, along with global research, we can't achieve the Paris climate goals without a protein transition. As I've said, we know that this is broadly in line with other global studies, and there's some very good work, GINA studies, Global Innovation Needs Assessment studies, and also by BCG that align with this work. And then also other studies in China about where they need to peak their industrial agriculture. We're really targeting, from our perspective, companies and banks and policymakers. So of course we want to trigger some discussion around this, and we want allies and people to I guess, know about this and other research that speaks to this. And we know that of course we all are here to ask for a just, humane protein transition. Just 2 scenarios that were really interesting with China, because again the industry often touts these approaches. If theoretically we swapped out and achieved an elimination of all enteric and manure mitigation, so eliminated methane from manure and enteric fermentation as often industry is trying to do, we still won't get there. There's still in excess, as you can see by the dark blue line above climate safety. The next scenario, again, these are both for China, is again, if, as the industry claims, we replaced red meat, being pork, beef and mutton, with aquaculture, so seafood being farmed, we also won't get there. So these narratives that industry is promoting and promulgating are just false, according to our modelling at least. And of course, if we have a more integrated climate strategy and ask companies to have a more integrated climate strategy, this would need to include eliminating deforestation, a decline in forest factory farming, and a massive scale-up of protein diversification. We know this work supports the climate approach and national decarbonisation targets. We know it helps to drive farm animal reduction and also biodiversity goals. We know that it can help decouple and reduce a range of other sustainability risks. And we know that it's aligning with an increased interest by Asians to spend their food in a much more sustainable, healthful way. And of course, we know that this aligns broadly with what younger consumers want, value-added products and so forth, with health as a priority. So our ask, unsurprisingly, is we want companies, policymakers, banks, etc., to be including protein transition, to be including the emissions in their targets, because they're not yet. And we know that this is going to involve, or need to involve, a peak in industrial systems as soon as possible, but certainly by 2030. And we encourage and ask companies to set targets for scaling up their alternative proteins. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much, Kate. I'm just constantly impressed with how much I'm learning in this conference. I hope we can access all the slides later. Is there a way we can do that, Tran? Do you know? We're going to load? Oh, nice. Yeah, I want to copy some of those later. So I'd like to welcome our next speaker. So Prashanth Vishwanath. He's the country director in India for Veganuary. He's a trained ecologist and has led programs in wildlife conservation, animal welfare, and behavior change for over 14 years. He's passionate about sustainable transition into plant-based food systems. He practices inclusive, positive, and enabling advocacy with various stakeholders, including the media and corporates, to mainstream plant-forward eating habits. And he presently leads Veganuary in India. Please welcome him to the stage.
Thank you, guys. And it's a privilege to be the last speaker, I guess, today, and probably the breakout sessions of the conference. And so nice to hear from my fellow panelists. Thanks for sharing your experience of your work. It's so enlightening to see what you're doing in across the world and in Asia in particular. My presentation today is going to focus on how people trying vegan is probably going to feed in to the next agricultural revolution. And as you can see, this was one of our campaign themes for 2023 January, that we really believe that empowering people to make more plant-forward eating choices will help transform our food system and generate the demand necessary to drive the change in our farming systems that is necessary for, I guess, the next agricultural revolution. So I want to backtrack a little bit and talk about the Green Revolution in Asia, which happened in the 1960s. So mainly this was meant to address the prevalent food insecurity and famines and inavailability of reliable finance to farmers, and at the same time issues with productivity of land that were the main issues with farming in the 1960s. It's specifically true for India and largely applicable for Asia as well. the Green Revolution did manage to accomplish many of these, but at the same time, it also brought in large-scale farming of a select few grains. In case of India, again, it was rice and wheat. And it also meant that we lost a lot of our native biodiversity in terms of food grains. It also brought in large-scale animal agriculture, which was promoted as agricultural allied activities, which was a precursor to the present sort of industrial-scale animal farming that we are seeing in Asia. While it addressed issues of reliable finance to farmers, it also brought in farmer indebtedness, which has led to a rather disturbing trend of farmer suicides in the country, especially in India in particular. And as someone had pointed out in the Hua app, yes, it led to, in some cases, irreversible damage to the environment, including land degradation, desertification, deforestation, water pollution, etc. So it was the 60s Green Revolution. While, like I said, it managed to solve some of the issues, some of the issues which it sought to address are still present to this day, which are stunting and wasting in, especially in children, malnutrition across, different demographics, protein deficiency, this is again true for India as well as largely for Asia, and micronutrient deficiencies. So repeatedly, the Global Hunger Index as well as the National Family Health Survey in India have repeatedly pointed these out as areas where the country needs to focus on. So, of course, 1960s was a completely different generation, right? Probably many of us weren't around that time. And at present, especially in Asia, there's been a massive generational shift, and which is more conscious of health, environment, and the animals. So it is, again, more prosperous, has more choice, and it is reflected in their eating habits. And we are seeing that as part of our work through Veganuary in trying to influence a positive change in eating habits. So what are our findings? In fact, in 2023, more than 700,000 people participated in the Veganuary challenge. And of that, close to 100,000 were from India. So we surveyed them, and we found that, especially in India, people chose to eat vegan or try vegan for the month for personal health, animals, and global health. Those were the top three reasons. It is similar worldwide. Again, animals, personal health, and environment were the top three reasons why people chose to try vegan for the month globally. And Asia is also, as we know, a production hub for animal products. And any change in attitudes towards eating is also likely to affect how the West eats and vice versa, right? So let's look at some figures now, right? So I'm making the claim that probably people trying more plant-based is leading on to the next agricultural revolution. So how do we say that? So one way it is probably feeding into the next agricultural revolution is in reducing the detrimental impact of large-scale farming, which is for every 1 million people who tried the 31-day challenge, we have saved 1.6 million gallons of water, close to 103.8 tons of carbon dioxide, and of course, what's most important for us, 3.4 million animals spared a lifetime of suffering. That's for every 1 million people, and so far, about 2.5 million people have tried vegan with Veganuary, right? And so just to backtrack a little bit and introduce what kind of work we do. So Veganuary works to sort of increase participation in the 31-day challenge by giving people all the resources, meal plans, recipes, cookbooks, etc. for free for the period of the 31 days. And we work with the corporate to engage brands, restaurants, retailers to increase the availability and accessibility of vegan food products, plant-based food products. And we raise awareness on these plant-forward eating habits through positive articles and engagement with media and celebrities. And finally, expanding our presence globally. Just last month, we launched in Spain, so which makes it the 10th official country for Veganuary to work in. And we work in a lot of different countries, even across Asia, with partners. So if you want to take Veganuary to your country, please get in touch with me. Yeah. And again, so to map the demand and change in attitude towards plant-based eating, Veganuary commissioned a market research study in December 2021 in India, which said that more than 60% Indians say their perceptions of a vegan diet have changed for the better in the last 2 years. And about 65% Indians said they are interested in trying a plant-based diet. So this is in terms of opportunity for plant-based food manufacturers, and people who are in a position to influence farming systems. It's a good takeaway. It's a good indicator about what is the kind of consumer sentiment in India. So at the same time, 83% of the people who tried vegan plan to significantly reduce animal products in their diet. Significantly means more than 50%. Right? So this is the global figure of all the people in the world who tried Veganuary. 83% plan to reduce their consumption of animal products by 50% or more. So I'll not go into the details of these statistics, but there is enough information and data available to show that the plant-based market is really booming, and it is set to top $74 billion by 2027, and the global vegan meat market itself will accelerate by 93% by 2025. So it is an indication to say it is an opportunity for the food industry to embrace the thriving plant-based food market, and again, especially in Asia. Right? We have some more pointers from our survey of Veganuary participants about what are the kind of areas where plant food manufacturers could focus. So one of the questions we asked the participants was, what was your biggest challenge in trying vegan, in staying vegan during Veganuary? So the top 3 reasons were dining out, dealing with friends and family. We've all had that, right? And missing non-vegan foods, right? So apparently, we need to step up our work with restaurants to ensure that plant-based dining out options are more available, and probably help people with more materials and information and techniques to deal with friends, family, and be more inclusive in our communication about plant-based eating. So another interesting question we asked was, which non-vegan products did they miss most during Veganuary? And globally, the response was that the top 3 things were cheese, eggs, and fish. But in India, particularly, the top 3 things that people missed during Veganuary were yogurt, milk, and chicken. So again, it gives us region-specific information about what are the areas where plant-based alternatives are most required, and for plant-based food manufacturers to sort of integrate their production systems, supply chains, and marketing systems to be tuned into what the consumer demand is. Right. So very quickly, I'll go into specific opportunities for Asia. Right. So in terms of crop diversity that I mentioned, we have lost significantly during the last green revolution. Here is an opportunity to reverse the loss of crop diversity and restore the cultivation of nutritious, low-carbon native crops, which I'm sure many of us have grown up eating and are part of our local South Asian cuisine. So that's a specific opportunity for Asia. And one very big opportunity is to leverage star crops like millets and shore up the nutritional security of the region. So 2023 has been declared as the International Year of the Millets by the Food and Agriculture Organization. They did feature quite prominently during the G20 summit, which concluded in India just last month. So at the same time, many companies have right now leveraged on this opportunity and introduced millet-based, sort of products which are plant-based into the market, and the millet market itself seems to be booming quite a bit, right? So this is one significant opportunity again for plant-based food manufacturers. And finally, we have an enormous talent pool in biotech and food tech in the subcontinent, in the Indian subcontinent, and also largely in Asia. So this was sort of demonstrated very well during the COVID pandemic and the development of the vaccine. So we are in a position to take advantage of the talent and the infrastructure available in the food tech industry and transform Asia into the production hub for alternate protein and fortified foods, which will address many of the problems that the last green revolution probably didn't. And finally, on a lighter note, if the next agriculture revolution does nothing else, it, I hope, saves us all from this question. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for everyone ending on time. I appreciate it. So we do have 2 questions in the app. If anyone does have more, please feel free to put them in, and we might have time. Do we want to just grab each of the chairs and we can each come up and sit for a minute, and I can bring this. So the first question is it not true that most of the food and agricultural revolution has impacted the nature and its resources negatively in the long run? So I think the question is, has the Industrial Revolution, on agriculture affected resources negatively or positively? Anyone like to address that?
I'm happy to start. Well, we know that industrial animal production is the biggest driver of deforestation, biodiversity loss. It's the biggest user of water, land, and antibiotics. So I think without a doubt, we know it's had an impact, and depending on the area, different impacts. Our colleagues can obviously get more specific about India, but certainly in Southeast Asia and elsewhere, we've seen not only environmental impacts that I've mentioned, but also we've seen like antibiotic resistance in residues, but also evolution of resistance in public waterways, contaminating our meat system and so forth, and a lot of other waste and pollution, as well as impacts on coastal fisheries and air pollution as well.
Anything to
add? Yep. Yes, of course. Industrial scale agriculture has led to, like I mentioned, loss of a lot of our biodiversity, and at the same time has, especially in Asia and India, created a sort of a public health sort of issue as well. I was surprised to learn that in one of the most fertile regions of India, which is the Gangetic Plain, in one of the states there is a train which runs to Delhi, and it's called the Cancer Express, informally, because the land, the groundwater is polluted so much that now it is not suitable for drinking, and there is so much prevalence of all types of cancer in the region. And this is, of course, in addition to, this is happening to people, and which we have a way of tracking and providing healthcare for. So imagine what is happening to the animals, the biodiversity, the native plants, the quality of the soil. Definitely, I think the next agriculture revolution, of course, needs to address these issues, the overuse of sort of chemical fertilizers, biocides, insecticides, and just the scale in which we are promoting and growing, are used to promoting and growing monoculture cultivations. Yeah.
Yeah, I resonate with my fellow speakers here, and I think here the regenerative agriculture system is the way forward, wherein we could promote the local biodiversity which we lost during the last agricultural revolution. We can rebuild that biodiversity bank, and we look forward for the new agricultural revolution, wherein we do not repeat these mistakes which we have done in our previous time.
Thank you so much. Another question, I'm going to summarize it, but sometimes animal-based foods like milk can be linked and promoted by religion. How do we address those issues?
I guess I'll take this first. Because again, nowhere else, I guess, in the world is milk so much of a emotive issue than in India, and because of Hinduism. So because of the cow being sacred. Yes, when we talk about plant-forward eating habits, we do need to be careful about how we communicate about milk, especially in India, which is that we are not able to sort of villainize milk in any way, or overly talk about the oppressive, the bad conditions in which cows are treated. Rather, we focus on positive messaging around milk, around plant-based milk, that how it's better for the environment, for your health, as well as it does away with all the different ways in which the animal, which is considered sacred, needs to be treated to get to extract milk from the animal. So to keep the information on cruelty and the religious linkage of milk to the minimum, and to speak more about the health and taste and environmental positivity of plant-based milk is, I think, more important in places which have a cultural, religious, sort of significance with cows and milk.
As he has covered almost entire aspect, I'll just add one more thing, that we should include the animal sentience in our mainstream food system, and we should educate the stakeholders accordingly. That will, I think, show us the way in this regard.
Okay. What are your perspectives on regenerative agriculture? And I guess before you answer, how would you define regenerative agriculture?
So, regenerative agriculture, that means using the same resource without more depletion, without altering the soil, and using the native crops, native biodiversity, and promoting the, you can say, the normal way of cultivation, using this natural way of pest management without involving any external application of synthetic such things, such pesticides and all, and using even the natural pollination system, wherein we also promote rejuvenating the lost pollinator bank of the crop. So I think this way we can address the regenerative agriculture.
This is an interesting one because in Europe it's very popular, and with beef farmers it's fairly popular. And I think it's an interesting question for this region, probably particularly for Southeast and East Asia. in the work that I showed, we sort of made a carve out for smallholders, definitely, and they need to be valued, supported, embraced and consulted and so forth. And they could be potentially the more regenerative component of the farming system in Asia, which is not so different from what they used to do in terms of circular systems in much of Southeast Asia and Southern Asia too. I think, however, to think that they're going to be broad-scale beef farming in the regenerative sort of format that maybe South Africa, to some degree US, even Australia, thinks is going to take us forward is misleading for Asia, because land is such in short supply. And that's driving farms vertical rather than horizontal. So I guess for us, whilst we certainly include it as part of the solutions and very much encourage the circular concepts, we don't think it's going to be the major component of the transition. Also because it's a tweaking of the same system. It's not transformational, arguably, and others may disagree. But I think there's... it's too easy for the big players to say, oh, we're now doing regenerative circular farming and not really changing the system, particularly for animals. So that's our broad perspective on it.
Yeah. Well, thank you all so much. So we're at time. I'd like to give our speakers another round of applause, and thank you all for coming.